Question 646. An effective listing interview between an agent and prospective client should A. Be standardized to cover every kind of property, B. Focus mainly on the licensee's selling achievements, C. Be specifically tailored for each particular property, D. Focus mainly on the licensee's career achievements. Correct answer is C. Be specifically tailored for each particular property. A standardized approach will likely be too generic and won't address the specific selling points and challenges of the client's property. It might not impress the client that the agent understands their unique situation. While past successes build trust, an interview overly focused on the agent's achievements may neglect the client's specific needs and property details. The focus should be on how the agent's skills and experience will benefit this client and this property. Each property is unique, with its own features, location, condition, and market position. A successful listing interview should focus on the specifics of the seller's property and the relevant market conditions for that type of property in that area. This demonstrates the agent's understanding of the client's specific needs and the nuances of selling their home. Question 647. A property estate is granted by John to Bob, for the life of Ruby. The three go fishing and Bob dies in a hurricane, while John and Ruby survive. The estate A. reverts back to John, the original owner, B. no longer exists, C. has its ownership decided by a judge, D. vests in Bob's heirs. Correct answer is D. vests in Bob's heirs. The estate granted is a life estate pure autre vie, meaning, for the life of another. Bob's ownership interest is measured by Ruby's life. Bob has the right to possess and use the property until Ruby dies. When Bob dies, his interest in the life estate passes to his heirs. They will hold the property until Ruby's death, at which point the life estate terminates, and the property typically reverts back to John, or whomever John designated as the remainderman. Question 648. The following statements regarding a broker's trust account are true, except A. Trust funds received by a broker must be deposited in a trust account, B. Trust funds cannot be deposited into an interest-bearing account, C. A minimum balance is not mandatory, D. Trust funds cannot be deposited into an account also containing rental income and security deposits from broker-owned properties. Correct answer is A. Trust funds received by a broker must be deposited in a trust account. Trust fund amounts do not have to be deposited into a trust account. They may also be paid directly to the seller or deposited into escrow or another neutral account. While depositing trust funds into a broker's trust account is a common and often required practice to safeguard client funds and prevent commingling, there are exceptions. The buyer and seller can provide written instructions for the funds to be handled differently, such as direct payment to the seller or deposit into an escrow account or another neutral third-party account. The key takeaway is that while a trust account is a primary mechanism for handling client funds, the parties involved in the transaction can provide alternative written instructions for the deposit and handling of those funds. Question 649. Before a real estate license is renewed, it is required to complete hours of approved courses within a 4-year period. A. 15, B. 25, C. 45, D. 100. Correct answer is C. 45. The California Bureau of Real Estate requires real estate licensees to complete 45 hours of continuing education every 4 years in order to renew their license. These courses cover various mandatory topics like agency, ethics, fair housing, trust funds, and risk management, as well as elective topics in consumer protection and consumer service. The renewal application cannot be submitted to the BRE more than 90 days before the expiration of the license. Question 650. A potential real estate buyer without a real estate license can do the following. A. Negotiate directly with a seller. B. Make a secret profit. C. Deposit funds with an escrow agent. D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. A buyer does not need a real estate license to negotiate the terms of a purchase directly with a seller or their agent. Buyers have the right to represent their own interests in a real estate transaction. There is no law preventing a buyer without a license from attempting to purchase a property at one price and then immediately resell it for a higher price without disclosing this to the original seller. However, this scenario is more relevant to investors and flippers acting on their own behalf, not as licensed agents. Buyers routinely deposit earnest money and other funds with an escrow agent as part of a real estate transaction. This is a standard practice to ensure the funds are held securely until all conditions of the sale are met. A real estate license is not required to deposit funds into escrow as a buyer. Therefore, a potential real estate buyer acting on their own behalf, without a license, has the right to negotiate, can potentially make a profit, though ethical considerations apply, and is a party who would typically deposit funds into escrow. Question 651. A would-be home buyer's loan application was turned down due to a negative credit report. If the applicant's request to see the credit report is denied, the applicant can A. Sue for actual damages. B. Sue for attorney fees and court fees. C. Both A and B. D. Sue for punitive damages up to $100,000. Correct answer is C. Both A and B. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, grants consumers specific rights regarding their credit reports. If a loan application is denied based on information in a credit report, the applicant has the right to 1. Know the reasons for denial. Lenders are required to provide an adverse action notice that includes the name and contact information of the credit reporting agency, CRA, that supplied the report. 2. Obtain a free copy of the credit report. The applicant is entitled to a free copy of the report from the CRA that was used in the adverse decision, provided they request it within 60 days of receiving the adverse action notice. 3. Dispute inaccurate information. Consumers have the right to dispute information they believe is inaccurate or incomplete with both the CRA and the information furnisher, the entity that provided the information to the CRA. If a CRA or a furnisher of information willfully violates the FCRA, the consumer can sue for 1. Actual damages. This includes any financial losses the applicant suffered as a direct result of the violation, e.g., higher interest rates on a subsequent loan due to the inaccurate information. 2. Attorney's fees and court costs. If the consumer wins their lawsuit, the FCRA allows them to recover their legal expenses. The FCRA doesn't specify a cap of $100,000 for punitive damages. The amount awarded would depend on the severity of the violation and the court's judgment. Therefore, the applicant, if wrongly denied access to their credit report after a loan denial based on it, can sue for both actual damages and attorney's fees and court costs. Question 652. Gordy is at the local ice skating rink when some other boys begin a hockey game. Gordy, a big hockey fan, asks to play and is put on one of the teams. During the game while going for the puck, Mario checks Gordy hard into the side of the arena, breaking Gordy's arm and a few of his ribs. If Gordy sues Mario for battery, Mario will probably A. Lose, because Mario hit Gordy on purpose. B. Win, because Gordy joined the game voluntarily and with knowledge of its rules. C. Lose, because Gordy suffered multiple injuries. D. Win, because Gordy had a duty to avoid being hit. Correct answer is B. Win, because Gordy joined the game voluntarily and with knowledge of its rules. By voluntarily participating in a hockey game, Gordy likely gave implied consent to the types of physical contact that are inherent in the sport. Hockey is a contact sport, and while there are rules against excessive or illegal checking, some level of physical contact is expected. When Gordy joined the game, he assumed a certain level of risk of injury associated with playing hockey, including the possibility of being checked. While Mario likely intended to check Gordy, which is part of hockey, the key is whether the check was within the normal rules and customs of the game. Battery requires an intentional harmful or offensive contact without consent. If the check was a typical, though hard, hockey check within the rules, it might not be considered a battery. The severity of Gordy's injuries is unfortunate, but it doesn't automatically establish liability for battery. The focus is on whether Mario's actions constituted an intentional harmful or offensive contact that was outside the bounds of the implied consent of the game. While players should try to avoid being hit, the primary responsibility for avoiding illegal or excessively harmful contact lies with the other players. Gordy's failure to avoid a legal check would not necessarily absolve Mario if the check was indeed a battery, e.g., illegal or excessively violent. Question 653. Which actions by a real estate broker would provide grounds for disciplinary action against him? A. The broker did not include a definite termination date in a listing agreement. B. The broker did not include a broker safety clause in a listing agreement. C. Despite his best efforts, the broker was unable to find a buyer for a property he listed. D. The licensee disclosed to the seller in a timely fashion that a potential buyer once worked for the licensee. Correct answer is A. The broker did not include a definite termination date in a listing agreement. While a safety clause is a common and recommended practice to protect the broker's commission after the listing expires under certain conditions, it is generally not a mandatory requirement for a listing agreement to be legally valid or to avoid disciplinary action. The absence of a safety clause might mean the broker isn't protected after the term, but it doesn't inherently violate regulations. The success of selling a property depends on various market factors and the property itself. A broker is not guaranteed to find a buyer, even with their best efforts. Failing to sell a property, in itself, is not grounds for disciplinary action, as long as the broker acted ethically and diligently according to the listing agreement. Disclosing potential conflicts of interest or relevant relationships is a responsible and ethical practice, not grounds for disciplinary action. This action demonstrates transparency and fulfills the licensee's duty of disclosure. In fact, failing to disclose such a relationship could potentially be problematic. California law, and the laws of many other states, requires that all exclusive listing agreements have a definite termination date. This protects sellers from being indefinitely bound to a listing agreement. Failure to include a specific expiration date is a violation of real estate regulations and can lead to disciplinary action by the Department of Real Estate, DRE. Question 654. Which corner is usually considered the most advantageous location for a retail establishment? A. Northeast. B. Southeast. C. Northwest. D. Southwest. Correct answer is D. Southwest. The southwest corner is generally the most desirable positioning for a business that partially relies on foot traffic, because it offers the most shade to pedestrians. Question 655. Which of the following are not township coordinate survey systems? A. Humboldt baseline and meridian. B. Mount Diablo baseline and meridian. C. San Andreas fault baseline and meridian. D. San Bernardino baseline and meridian. Correct answer is C. San Andreas fault baseline and meridian. The Public Land Survey System, PLSS, in California utilizes three primary baseline and meridian systems to divide and describe land. 1. Humboldt baseline and meridian governs surveys in the northwestern part of California. 2. Mount Diablo baseline and meridian covers most of northern and central California, and a portion of Southern California. 3. San Bernardino baseline and meridian, used for surveys in Southern California. Therefore, the option that is not a township coordinate survey system in California is San Andreas Fault baseline and meridian. The San Andreas Fault is a significant geological feature but is not used as a baseline or meridian for the public land survey system. The survey systems use imaginary lines to set land descriptions, baselines that go east-west and meridians running north-south.